The air in the valley of Oakhaven was turning sharp with the coming of October, the kind of cold that bites into your bones if you aren't moving. For Thomas, movement was the only thing he had left. At 72, Thomas lived on a plot of land that had been in his family for 4 generations. It wasn't a massive industrial farm. It was a sanctuary of soil, sweat, and silence. To the people in the town of Oakhaven, Thomas was a ghost. He was the man you saw at the edge of the market twice a year, his truck filled with the most vibrant heirloom tomatoes and crisp apples anyone had ever seen. But for the last 3 years, Thomas had stopped selling. The townspeople whispered. Some said he had gone senile. Others said he had become a miser, hoarding his crops in a cellar while the local economy struggled. But no one actually went up the winding dirt road to ask. No one, except for a 19-year-old named Leo. Leo was at a crossroads that felt more like a dead end. He had dropped out of community college to take care of his mother, who was recovering from a grueling surgery. They were 3 months behind on rent, and the local grocery store prices were climbing higher every week. One evening, desperate and fueled by a rumor he had heard at the gas station that Thomas had sheds full of grain, Leo decided to do something he never thought he would be capable of. He decided to steal. The climb up the hill was silent. Leo reached the perimeter of the farm around midnight. The moon was a silver sliver, casting long, distorted shadows across the rows of corn. He made his way toward the main barn, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He reached for the heavy wooden latch, but before his fingers could touch the grain-worn wood, a voice cut through the dark. The latch sticks if you pull it that way. You have to lift and then slide. Leo nearly jumped out of his skin. Standing near the shadow of a tractor was Thomas. He wasn't holding a shotgun or calling the police. He was holding a lantern and a thermos. "I've been expecting someone," Thomas said quietly. "The hungering town is getting louder than the crickets." Instead of a confrontation, Thomas invited Leo into the farmhouse. What followed wasn't a lecture, but a revelation. Over the next hour, Thomas showed Leo the truth. The sheds weren't full of rotting grain or hoarded wealth. They were empty. Every single week, for 3 years, Thomas had been secretly delivering his entire harvest to the backloading docks of the county food bank and the local orphanage. He did it in the middle of the night, leaving no name and taking no credit. "Why?" Leo asked, his voice trembling with the shame of his intended theft. Thomas looked out the window at the dark fields. "Because when I lost my wife 5 years ago, I realized that the things we keep for ourselves rot. Only the things we give away stay fresh forever. I have enough to live on. The land provides my bread. Why should I sell what the earth gives me for free to people who are already struggling to pay their bills?" But Thomas had a problem. His heart was failing, and the harvest this year was too heavy for one man. He told Leo that if he wanted to eat, he had to work. Not for Thomas, but for the valley. The next 4 months were a grueling masterclass in humanity. Leo showed up every morning at 5 a.m. He learned that soil isn't just dirt. It's a living history. He learned how to listen to the wind to know when the frost was coming. More importantly, he learned about the people Thomas was helping. They would drive the old truck into town at 3 a.m., dropping off crates of squash, potatoes, and greens. Leo saw the faces of the people who found those crates the next morning. The single mothers, the out-of-work miners, the elderly. He saw hope return to the valley, one vegetable at a time. However, the conflict of the story arrived in November. A large agricultural developer had realized that Thomas's land sat directly on a natural spring. They wanted the water rights, and they wanted Thomas off the land. They offered him $500,000, enough for Thomas to live in luxury for the rest of his life. When Thomas refused, they started a smear campaign in the town, telling the local council that the farm was a public health hazard because Thomas was unfollowing industrial safety protocols. The town council called a public hearing. Leo watched as the developer's lawyers, in their $1,000 suits, painted Thomas as a delusional hermit who was wasting valuable resources. The room was silent. Thomas sat in the front row, his hat in his lap, looking small. Then Leo stood up. He didn't give a speech about the law. He didn't talk about money. He pulled out a worn notebook, the logbook Thomas had kept for 3 years. He started reading names. He read the name of the councilman's sister, who had received a crate of food when her husband lost his job. He read the name of the local school teacher who had been gifted wood from Thomas's lot to heat her home during the winter. He read the names of 40 families in that room. "You call him a waste of resources," Leo said, his voice echoing in the hall. "But Thomas is the only resource this town has that isn't for sale. He's been feeding us while we were busy judging him. He's been keeping us warm while we were whispering behind his back." One by one, the people of Oakhaven stood up. It started with the librarian, then the mechanic, then the baker. Within minutes, the entire room was standing in a silent wall of protection around the old man. The developers realized they weren't fighting a hermit, they were fighting a community that had finally found its soul. The developers left town the next day. But the real miracle happened a year later. Thomas passed away quietly in his sleep, looking out over the fields he had saved. He didn't leave the land to a corporation. He left it in a land trust, with Leo as the head caretaker. Today, the Oakhaven Community Farm is the largest of its kind. It doesn't have a cash register. It has a sign at the gate that reads, "Take what you need. Give what you can." Leo still wakes up at 5 a.m. He still lifts and then slides the latch on the barn door. And every Tuesday night, a fleet of trucks driven by volunteers from the town heads out into the dark to make sure no one in the valley goes to bed hungry. The story of Thomas and Leo reminds us that the greatest harvest we can ever sow isn't found in the ground, but in each other. We spend our lives building fences, thinking they protect us, but the only thing that truly saves us is the bridge we build to our neighbor. Come and harvest if you believe in the power of community.